Early last month, headlines erupted with claims that Prince William had quietly hired a professional crisis manager. Predictably, the media went hunting for the usual royal drama. Old scandals were dusted off, whispers were recycled, and once again the same tired formula was rolled out. Distract, deflect, and redirect public attention away from real accountability. Names like Prince Andrew were dragged in, rumours about William and Kate's marriage were inflated, and almost by reflex commentators tried to pull Prince Harry and Meghan into the narrative, even when they had nothing to do with the matter. But something changed. The focus shifted sharply when the US Department of Justice released a significant tranche of documents linked to Jeffrey Epstein. This wasn't about gossip or tabloid invention. These were records, emails, financial trails, and once those documents entered the public domain, they redirected attention toward institutions, charities, and public figures who had benefited directly or indirectly from Epstein's money long after his criminal conviction was public knowledge. What followed exposed a deeply uncomfortable contrast between two royal brothers. One who walked away from a system he believed was morally broken, and another still embedded in structures that repeatedly fail basic ethical tests. Among the most disturbing revelations was confirmation that WildAid, a high-profile wildlife conservation charity, accepted a $50,000 donation from Jeffrey Epstein in November 2013. This was not before his conviction. This was years after. By that time, Epstein's criminal history was widely reported, and his association with Prince Andrew had already become a reputational liability for the monarchy. The timing is critical because 2013 was also the year WildAid named Prince William as an ambassador. The charity leaned heavily on celebrity-driven campaigns, promoting its work through powerful imagery, star power, and crucially royal involvement. Emails released in the document dump show WildAid staff referring to Epstein's generous support, while actively linking his donation to the charity's campaigning momentum. This is not a technicality. This is the core of the issue. WildAid later tried to narrow the fallout by stating that the videos featuring William alongside David Beckham and Yao Ming were filmed earlier in 2013 before Epstein's donation arrived. Fine. That may limit one line of criticism, but it does not answer the bigger question. Why was Epstein's money accepted at all? And why was he treated as a donor worth cultivating? The released correspondence is revealing not just for what it confirms, but for how WildAid framed its relationship with Epstein after receiving his money. In February 2014, the charity's managing director emailed Epstein's office, thanking him and referencing the launch of new rhino horn public service announcements in London. The same email chain encouraged Epstein's team to circulate press coverage that included a speech by King Charles III, then Prince of Wales, praising WildAid's work. This matters because it shows intent. Epstein was not treated as an anonymous donor whose money was quietly logged and forgotten. He was flattered. He was courted. He was encouraged to associate himself with royal-backed environmental campaigns. WildAid can argue it ran a broad operation with many donors. But the emails show something more pointed. Staff saw Epstein as a valuable asset, someone whose money and perceived influence were worth leveraging even at the risk of reputational harm to the very royals whose names gave the charity its credibility. The problem did not end with a single donation. In 2014, WildAid continued reaching out to Epstein, attempting to arrange meetings with senior figures, including its co-founder and executive director in New York. Later correspondence even invited him to a private dinner with charity leadership and a celebrity supporter. WildAid has since insisted that no meetings ever took place and that no staff member actually met Epstein or his team. But again, intent matters. The emails show a willingness to build a relationship. There was no moral firewall, no pause, no visible concern about optics or ethics. By this point, Epstein's conviction was common knowledge. His links to Prince Andrew were widely discussed. The risk was obvious. Yet the charity pressed on. When these emails resurfaced, Kensington Palace responded with a familiar strategy: narrow the scope, shift responsibility, and say as little as possible. Officials said the correspondence was a matter for WildAid and declined to comment on whether any donor checks were carried out. This is where public frustration hardens into distrust. Charities linked to senior royals do not operate in a vacuum. They actively trade on royal association. They use images, speeches, and endorsements to build credibility and attract donors. When something goes wrong, simply saying, "not our responsibility," is not good enough. The public expects stronger safeguards, not institutional silence. This is not the first time weak controls around royal-linked fundraising have been exposed. In June 2025, leaked emails showed that Minerva Mondejar Steiner, listed as a sponsor of the royal charity Polo Cup, offered wealthy clients a private audience with Prince William for $20,000. When the Sunday Times reported it, Kensington Palace cut ties within hours, insisting William did not support paid access. The speed of that response was telling. It showed that action is possible when the media forces it. But it also revealed the deeper problem. These issues are not being identified internally. They surface only after journalists uncover them. That is not oversight. That is crisis management. Even more troubling is that Epstein-related concerns around William's name were circulating years earlier. A 2011 internal email now public shows associates discussing a British reporter actively investigating Epstein and mentioning Prince William by name. This suggests journalists were probing potential royal connections long before the WildAid donation ever happened. Another 2011 message shows Epstein himself claiming that the palace had asked him about pursuing a lawsuit during the phone hacking scandal. No names were given, no evidence was provided, but the pattern is unmistakable. Epstein repeatedly invoked proximity to royal institutions, and those references were never firmly shut down in public. Silence, once again, allowed ambiguity to grow. This is where the contrast with Prince Harry becomes unavoidable. Harry has spent years warning about exactly this kind of moral failure. Institutions protecting themselves first, reputations managed instead of values defended, and accountability avoided until it becomes impossible to ignore. His decision to step away was not about personal comfort. It was about refusing to be complicit in systems that repeatedly fail the basic test of right and wrong. While William remains tied to charities and structures that struggle with transparency, Harry has focused his work on mental health, veterans, and community-led initiatives where accountability is clearer and values are explicit. He has been criticized relentlessly for speaking out, yet time and again, events like this prove his concerns were not imaginary, they were prescient. Environmental causes linked to the monarchy often present themselves as morally unimpeachable. Saving wildlife, protecting the planet. Noble goals without question. But noble goals do not excuse careless governance. When wealthy donors are involved, especially those with controversial histories, the obligation to vet, question and refuse becomes even stronger. Accepting money from a convicted sex offender, then flattering him, engaging him, and associating his support with royal-backed campaigns is not a minor oversight. It is a failure of judgment. And when those failures are met with deflection instead of accountability, public trust erodes further. What we are witnessing is not just another royal controversy. It is a case study in two very different approaches to power and responsibility. Prince William's world reacts when forced, narrows statements, and hopes the news cycle will move on. Prince Harry chose a harder path, walking away, speaking out, and enduring years of hostility for refusing to play along. The Epstein documents did not create this problem. They merely exposed it. And as more records become public, one truth grows clearer. The question is no longer whether there were warning signs. The question is why those signs were ignored and why those who raised concerns were dismissed, attacked, and ridiculed for daring to challenge the system. In that light, Prince Harry's stance does not look rebellious or reckless. It looks principled. And Prince William's continued entanglement with poorly scrutinised institutions looks less like leadership and more like a liability the palace keeps hoping will disappear on its own.